Or so if you could go into the previous month's
Sure.
minutes and just update all the information of the agenda and the date, and you'll kind of see what was written last time, 2 or 3 sentences.
Yeah, I always read them when you send them.
Right. Capturing decisions.
Yes,
is like
yeah,
the key.
and any action.
Decisions and votes.
Yeah, and
Those are-
votes,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, those are the only legal requirements is that you capture
Yeah.
the votes.
I mean, I think it's helpful to do often a little more because if somebody misses a meeting, they can read the minutes and catch up. But they don't have to be extensive.
I may be able to take it over next year, but I think this sounds like a very fair way to distribute. Yeah.
I think it's fair, you know, just.
So Nancy, I think you would remain our secretary in name, but kind of maybe just make sure that there's somebody prepped each time to be able to do the minutes. If that makes sense. Yeah, if we've named somebody who knows that they're gonna do.
Can we make a schedule in advance and just?
Yeah. Schedule in
Of the
advance.
year.
Yeah, yeah, good idea.
That's
we
what the
have the date
sustainability
for all
committee
of
does.
Yeah,
They rotate on,
Does everybody know how to open a Google Doc? If I send a Google Doc with a link, can you click on it and fill in?
you can just fill in which sometime you know you're gonna be able to take. That sounds good.
Yeah. And we're always the third, what is it?
Well, we're usually the last.
The last
Yeah.
Wednesday,
Yeah,
so I'll go ahead and do that. Okay.
all right, that seems like a good.
Just very
Thank you,
fair.
Nancy.
It is, so.
Thank you for
It's April,
being secretary
April
for
30th.
long,
that's
Nancy.
this one. Thank you, yes.
And doing such a great job.
The-
that We're all
Yeah,
intimidated.
such a good job. No.
Oh,
That's
yes,
something I
right.
lean on
Oh, that's right. The meetings are all recorded.
when I remember to push the
on our
button.
website. So if you need to go back and check on anything, go back and check.
I also, when I take minutes for the EDC, I record votes and attendance and bullet points, and I put a line at the bottom that says, for more information, see the recording.
Oh, that's good.
Because I don't, it's hard to transcribe an hour and
Oh,
a
yeah.
half worth of,
Yeah.
this one's, he said, she said, they said, we said, that's a lot for me.
That's very efficient.
It's what I
Good.
do.
Okay, so we have a lot of updates. And we'll start with the, finally, the salt piles. Sean, tell about the ceremony.
Good, good. So there'll be a ceremony Monday night.
This
At
Monday.
the outset of the city council meeting. The print will be there on display somehow. It's a big print, 50 by 60.
It's framed, right?
And the donors have been thanked with a letter from the city manager. They've been invited. You all have been invited. I sent it to the Arts and Cultural Commission as well. So I saw Carl yesterday. I will see him, I think, on Friday to deliver said donation. And then we just got to figure out how to make it visible and nice in the city council
City council.
chambers.
Hey, you-
when I got the notice about this from being on the cultural commission, my first thought was, is there any plan for like little reception? So people can come out to the reception area after? I mean, I know I can't, but if
We-
everyone else can,
We did not.
okay. Okay,
We did not. It was, yeah. I'll leave it at that.
7:00, right?
7 o'clock. It's going to come with the committee updates.
Oh, I
It's
see.
literally
It
part
should
of the
be
meeting. It's
Okay.
embedded in the
That's
meeting,
important to know.
and that's at the top of the meeting. just so
very
you
top.
all know, it's the very top of the city council meeting. I think even before public comment, am I right?
I think so.
I believe so,
I think
yeah.
so. So,
Have we asked Carl to say anything, or is the mayor gonna talk, or do we know that?
I saw some emails about talking points between Monty and Joanna Deemer. If Carl, I can reach out to Carl, or if you want to reach out to Carl.
Yeah, I don't know if he's somebody who'd like to talk, but I think if the artist is there, it would be
Sure.
good to invite him. I can reach out to him.
Okay,
He's a pretty quiet guy.
He is a quiet guy, but it'd
But
still
deep,
be helpful to
very
say,
deep.
yeah,
okay, so you have that.
yeah, I'll do that.
Thank you.
And I assume,
Lot to say.
just in terms of presentation, will the mayor be handling it? or-
That's how it normally goes. I would expect that.
Okay. I just
I,
want to
I
make
don't,
sure.
I say that, I'm really, I don't sit on the fourth floor anymore, so.
So Kate, is it something you want to take a
I can talk to the mayor.
just to
and-
see how it's going to go?
And ask, yeah, how it's gonna go.
Yeah,
Exactly.
okay. And then I'll let you know if Carl is willing to say anything.
Okay, okay, that sounds good.
Pierce Island, we got engineering drawings, we got stuff. What do you want to
That
say
wasn't a
about
good
it? Does that
look.
not seem good?
That wasn't a good look.
No, everything seems to be going accordingly. They're starting fabrication. So they got the soil tested. I was hoping for one more confirmation from our end, but I didn't get it, but I shared the report from the soil testing company with DPW. So if there was a red flag,
And what about the engineering? Do they have all that stuff?
I'll double check that.
Because I was surprised that, I'm not great at reading those things, but there is like a risk rating, Alyssa, you'll know about it, a risk rating for different types of buildings that is standard. And it was a risk 3, which is a high rating, but after, there's wind speed, they've tested it for wind speed, they've tested it for load, they've tested it for all kinds of things. And given its location on Pierce Island, and I assume it got a risk level of 3, which just means it has to have, special supports and whatever. Because if somebody was out there in a high gusty wind and was near it or inside it, I could see that it could be a quite dangerous thing.
Wow.
Because I would think the opposite, because it has all cutouts, like.
So that
Right,
when you travel.
But these engineering requirements they're short of hurricane force winds, because that's identified, but they have to do like for a 50-year or 100-year event. So they have to be super careful.
I think what's gonna be fascinating about this is in a windstorm, what kind of sound does it make because of the cutouts?
It'd be kind of cool.
Positive person.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. But the good news is all that seems to be done, and the foundation, specs and all of that. So, and if they've started fabrication, maybe we really will have it. in the spring.
Is there a review process for that, for their engineering, and it's DPW looking at that, or is that what's happening now?
So I don't know how that works.
It should go to
Yeah, I mean, I either sent it to them or I will send it to them tomorrow when I received it. I just haven't been through this whole process of a structure going up. But I'm sure if I were to pull out the contract, it would have all the language in there to answer those questions. It is on my desk.
Yeah, because they're gonna have to be helped by DPW to put it in, just for, getting the equipment to Pierce Island, all of that sort of stuff. The inventory and the postings, even though Beth was sick, she was able to.
I had a deadline.
It is it's a little hard to find on our website. I don't know if you have a suggestion of how we could make it easier to find, but it's there.
Yeah, I'll think about that. I mean, we've all discussed this. I mean, it's not ideal in
No,
its
not
current
yet.
form, but at least we have that.
Right.
And thank you everyone for all the research. And Stephanie Secord did a great job. She found a lot of extra information. So what you see on the website now is more than the latest version, which is fantastic. And then I've taken all her edits and I've already started working on the next round because I created a past art section. Chris had notified me of some past art that we can include, and we'll put that, the Korean art one that used to be on Mr. Kim's, I'll move that there. And then I know you're still digging into one item, I think,
Yeah,
Hanover Garage.
yeah,
Those,
all right, so I'll just
maybe
throw
any-
it out
yeah.
because I've looked in a lot of places and I can't find it, but maybe I didn't look in the one obvious place, but the bronze 3D site plan of the former North End. It's
Yes.
there, it's in two positions. One is on, outside of the garage, and the other is kind of on the corner of, I mean, I call it the made-up street, but okay. But it's, they're not, they're there, and it's really striking, and I just keep looking, and the only lead I got was when I walked into the building, just in a chatty sort of way, and someone said, yeah, oh, Salmon Falls. So I looked up Salmon Falls Foundry, Salmon Falls, but anyway,
Are you talking about the two at Port Walk?
yeah,
So those were done by Jeff Johnston, and that was that.
At
whole-
Cathartes, right?
Yeah,
They were done
Cathartis,
as
so
part of a-
they would know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have
So it was-
Jeff's email.
okay, good.
Yeah.
If you would send that to
was
me.
A stipulation.
That's right.
From the HDC that they put some public art in,
That they
Okay,
memorialize.
if you could
in
send me
some
that,
way.
that would be great.
yeah,
I mean, because I think
There's
I
probably
think they're
some
wonderful.
Well, the HDC should have
yeah.
information.
Reagan might know. Let me see if
I
I can
think I
reach
went
out
to the
Reagan.
ceremony. when they
Fantastic.
unveiled it.
We'll update that
You
then.
were there?
And if ever anyone sees anything, I'm always working on the next version, so I'll be
Okay,
the
good.
the keeper of the
That's good.
golden copy. so
And
to
we
speak.
we have located photographs of all of those temporary art. Remember the artist came and did the murals on walls that have like the shark and all those, which the shark is
Mhm.
one of the
Yes,
only things
great art.
left. So that can go in the past art. Some of those could go in the past.
And I did create a new section for the public library as well. I separated that out because we can just keep adding to that.
Pulled into the, on Middle Street, that turns into Lafayette Road, but pulled into that deli, that little convenience store, and I said to run in and get something. And there on the whole wall, which has been there forever, is
Yeah.
this giant mural, and I thought, oh, maybe that's just.
No,
somebody
Chris-
cover
I
that?
put it
Do
in-
we
Chris
have
put it
that?
on, yeah. So do that, keep doing that.
It's peeling, but.
Yeah. And both Monty and Stephanie indicated, we haven't seen it yet, but that they'll put something about it in the city newsletter and do a public press release about the inventory as well.
I'm sorry, but I took a picture of it for the public art page, and there is an information thing right under it.
I'm sorry, Nancy, I didn't look on that.
So, but right under the piece itself, it might tell
Yeah,
who
where to
who
get-
who
great.
created.
I'll go look.
Yeah.
That's good.
Thank you.
Anything else, Beth, about? Oh, I can say one thing. I did follow up. I had sent, remember we had Sarah Tibbetts from
Yes.
and who was here last time, and we had shared with her the public art archive. I followed up with her the other day to ask if they've done anything with that yet or whatever, and they're looking into it, but they hadn't done anything
I
yet.
have an update.
Okay.
And also I have an update on her name because I wrote it down. Roberts Terry.
Roberts Terry.
Sarah Roberts Terry. She did have a conversation with the Public Art Archive that you brought to our attention. And it looks like Portsmouth Historical Society will be able to access the functionality needed to create a walking tour
Yay.
within that
Wow.
website, and it is mobile friendly.
Yay.
So it is effectively like an app.
The Portsmouth
So-
Historical
It's
Society.
exciting. It's really.
Yeah.
That's cool.
She was.
Because they wanted to create a public art walking tour to align with their Cabot Lifer exhibition, and Chris introduced Sarah, who is the program director, to that resource, and she actually had the conversation with them, and it
Super.
seems great, because we were gonna look for, we at Portsmouth Historical Society, we're gonna look for some grant funding for it.
But you'll be able to.
Now we
just
don't
do
think
it.
we're gonna. need
Excellent.
to, Yeah.
Sean?
Just to interject, Robin has joined. She's home, not feeling well, so no camera, but she's with us.
Hi, Robin.
Hey.
Hi, Robin.
Hi, Robin.
I
Hey,
can
everybody, sorry, I'm just under the weather and I don't want to be around people.
And I
Feel
can send that inventory in any way they need it. I mean, it's in a PDF now because it's just ginormous with all the pictures, but I can send it different ways.
Oh, that's good. We can follow up with her on that. But that's exciting. That's great.
Yeah.
Um, Okay, annual report. I know most of you took a look at it and people added a few suggestions and comments, but I think it's good to go. So I'll put those final things in if anybody hasn't looked at it and wants to.
I haven't, sorry.
Why don't you, Beth? Because,
yeah.
why don't I send you the version I have, because I've incorporated some things along the way. And we'll get it to council. It's too late to get it to them for the Monday meeting, but we'll get it to them for their next
Right.
meeting. And it's fun to do it. It was fun to do it because we really have done a lot. We really have gotten ourselves into a good place. I put the connecting with DPW about the bond mall. I don't know if that's happened, but I just want us not to forget it.
I will, when I have updates, right, well, actually, you guys wanted to connect with them.
Yes,
I don't,
just
yeah,
to make sure that they're not getting ahead of us. We wouldn't get ahead of them, just so we can plan.
right. I did mention it, and as I shared, there's really not a design process yet for above ground, but that is going to come this fall after the underground stuff is done this spring. So that's when I guess there'll be opportunity to get in to make that connection. Or
No,
whatever.
yes, okay, it's just that it would be very beneficial for us to know if it is even conceivable, so we can, as a
That's true.
subcommittee, start working with abutters with an understanding of a timeline
Yeah.
of when we might be able to jump into the process, and we
Okay.
know that they're like willing to let that happen.
Right, because that's a
So
long
we
process.
can't just wait for them to be like, okay, now we're ready to go, and we have not talked to anybody or decided on anything. Right?
Okay.
Yeah, so that'd be good.
So if someone could just articulate the specific ask that you'd like me to make.
I think it's a meeting with whoever is, a meeting with the committee, the small committee, and whoever is managing or will be managing the current process with,
Right.
the bond mall design.
Okay.
I know the only person I've talked to about it was Dave DeFossis, but I talked to him because he was doing the
He's in
tree.
charge of everything.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And he has to do all the underground stuff.
But he's not the design.
He is
would-
not the design. He's the person who executes everything.
Right.
Yeah. But I will start there just to understand the timeline and the process and express that Park would like to be engaged as soon as possible.
Right, because if the answer is
Is no, look
no,
for somewhere
we
else.
can pivot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Yep. Thank you.
And maybe this is something that comes before the proposal from Public Art comes to the council. Because we haven't officially accepted the donation of that yet, because we had to make sure we could do something. As soon as we get an idea, so that the council can say, yes, let's do that there before they go into the planning
Yes,
sessions. Do you
Yeah.
know what I'm saying?
yeah.
Um,
But we need to do that due diligence first, so we're not backtracking.
Yeah, it's a little chicken and egg, I think, because also when they
It
put
is
out an RFP, they would need that to be part of what they're asking the designer to incorporate. That designer would need to know that there's a piece,
Right.
something else working on it. So I'm not sure which comes first.
No, the challenge is that the council has to accept the money. So we have to know that there's
Mm,
going to be, so the council though can accept the money for a piece of art at
And
Bond
hold it,
Mall
and hold it.
and hold it.
Yeah,
And then you go forward because you have the money that's
Yeah.
accepted, and then,
So is there anything keeping us from moving forward with that acceptance?
well, we don't know if it can be at Bond Mall. That's what Nancy was saying. So that's what
Oh.
we have to,
You can't just accept it for use on city property.
well,
We'd want
you
to be more specific.
you can technically, I'm not sure if the donor, I'm not sure where the donor would stand on that, but also, it's always good to check with the city manager about what thinking is around timing and planning and.
well, so
I
for
think the
example,
more information we provide to
Yeah.
the council, the better.
yeah,
I feel like I'm missing a step. So, the money, when you say that there's a donor for money, is it
Mhm.
specifically for Von Mall?
No,
No,
it's
it
for
wasn't.
LGBTQ art,
Oh, okay.
yeah, so
Public. Right.
public art.
So something,
Public property.
some city space that this group has been talking about Vaughn Mall, but it,
We thought it was an opportunity since it was going to be redone. We thought it would be an opportunity to get in on something as it was being built. We just want to know if that's a reality.
okay.
Yeah.
That's all. If not, we'll find another location.
Got
And if there's any question about it, what would it take to make it a reality?
Right.
You know, that's what we need to know.
I'm clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cabot Lyford exhibit opens March 27th. So they have, you know, with the openings, there's usually a party. There is a cost for the opening night, but you can go onto the Historical Society website and see that if interested in doing it.
Chris, can I just mention something? The exhibit doesn't open up till April 1st. The opening party is just March 27th, and then the exhibit doesn't open till April 1st.
But people who go to the opening party will be able to see the exhibit, correct, Robin?
Yes, but the 29th, the 30th, the 31st, you can't come and see it.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
And also the 27th is a fundraiser. Just be prepared. It's silent auction, live auction, cocktails. I will be wearing something that's not a t-shirt.
Sorry, I came from my art studio. I look like a slob, I know.
Mhm.
Okay, so what we were going to do was to do a review of the Ona Judge mural. And I thought it would be helpful just to tell you a little bit about it so that we'll be prepared for it. It needs to come to us at the next meeting because they're going to HDC. They'd really hoped to come tonight, but the artist, they were not able to get the information they needed from the artist. So I think all of you probably know Ona Judge, who was the Washington slave.
No, Lenny had a question.
You just answered.
Okay. And, you know, ran away to and eventually ended up here in Portsmouth for a while. So the Black Heritage Trails headquarters on Court Street, the green building that is just one end. If you think, I think we all think of it as a clapboard building, but it's got one wall that's brick. The wall that's fairly close to the house next to it. There's a driveway in between. And it's on that brick wall, two-story house that they want to do the mural. They have decided that they would do it on panels. I mean, it's, you know, such a you can't really, you shouldn't paint on brick. Would be an issue. I mean, we all remember the whale wall and what happened. So the artist is going to do it on panels, and then those panels are going to be affixed to the wall. And so they have to go to HDC because they're in the district. They had to get a variance, which they did a couple years ago, because mural sign, you know, that confusion. So they have a variance and they have an extension on their variance because they did this quite a while ago. It will be fairly large. I think it will cover the wall. And I think it will be quite realistic. And I say that because the artist had asked them to have a model, which they've done. They've done a model shoot in a historic costume. And they've actually done research about the waterfront of Philadelphia will be behind her because that's where she left the ship. So they've done a lot of background research. So I think it'll be quite realistic. And it will come to us for review.
When I picture the site, I'm just curious about the sight lines, i.e.
It's going to be challenging.
Yeah, I mean, how you're gonna get it, aside from getting it in there, then is it just facing that?
It's
Who's gonna
facing-
see, how, are they concerned about its visibility?
Well, it's a question we'll ask. I mean, there's a driveway between the two houses. So most people, I think, will see it at an angle.
Yeah.
You'll see it at an angle. And I think it will be interesting to ask questions about, has the artist taken that angle into account in terms of, you know, placement of the different figures on, and how it's laid out, that sort of thing.
Isn't the Black Heritage office, isn't it housed within the same building as the Portsmouth Historical Society? Or 'cause
No,
you
no,
said
no, that's
green-
the.
No, that was years ago, years and years. They've been gone for about 6 years from from the Portsmouth Historical Society.
It's a former law office. It's a
Mhm.
it's colonial house. Jen,
Whose driveway is it? I mean, it's their driveway?
No, I believe
well,
it
we'll
belongs to the
we'll have to
house.
ask that question.
Because, I mean, that's a huge issue. If people are gonna be looking at it, especially if it comes onto our, it'll be part of our public art tour. And we'll ask people to step and look at it from somebody else's driveway?
These are
That-
questions we'll
yeah.
have to ask.
Okay.
It also might be worth a site, if you have time on Court Street, walking by.
I think
It's
so.
very useful because it's not as
Yeah.
much of an issue as
Yep, I
we
see.
may
You
be
can see it from the
considering
sidewalk.
it.
Yeah, you can see
Yeah.
it from the sidewalk.
You'll see it at an angle from the sidewalk.
Yeah,
and It's
but-
like,
No more of an angle than you see the other one that's on Court Street when you walk down the sidewalk.
Yeah, true.
Right. And we'll be adding it to our walking tours at Portsmouth Historical Society as well. So there'll be lots of people that'll be viewing it, and we can, if we can work with this committee, or we'll find a good viewing spot, because it'll be daily that will be walking by and talking about it.
so, we'll carve out time at the next meeting for that. Done, criteria.
Criteria. I think we talked about this when we very first started doing the criteria that Mara and I talked about. It's like, is this a living document? Because when we had the artist here 2 times ago, I think 2 meetings ago, Mara and I looked at each other and said, we don't have any criteria for temporary art at all. So we kind of came up with a few bullet points for this, but we did have some questions, and I think it's worth talking about and worth reviewing to say, is this something that we need to have? And then is this the right stuff to add to that? So I think, does everybody get their copy? Because I think the first question we had was just, we defined public art as short-term installation. Now, how long is short-term? And I think that was really kind of the big question that we had. And we also wanted to make sure that there was a removal date included in that proposal. But, it can go anywhere from 1 week to a year. Do we need to specify that? Do we need to limit it to up to a year? What are people's thoughts on that? For what could be considered temporary?
So temporary art could be something as ephemeral as, let's say, a Buddhist mandala, when they take beautiful
Sure.
colored sand and then at the end they blow it all away.
Right.
Or a street festival where they do chalk drawings and it gets rained upon.
If
Then
that's,
it could be something
Mhm.
longer, so we might want to have an end date.
But
I
I,
think we have to, I guess my point is we have to have probably an end date, because otherwise it really isn't, it would be more permanent. But my question is,
Right.
what's that timeline? What do we consider temporary?
the part that I find, I want to add to what Jen is saying, because the part that I found a little problematic, and I find more so now that I did my writing on the reflections of Portsmouth that's at the garage, where I think that we're talking temporary, and it surely could be something like, a sand painting that's blown away and disappears. But in the case of that work, it was conceived as a temporary piece, and, it grew and it developed and it morphed, and, now it's a permanent piece, and it's really, its current incarnation is really, it's quite an addition to the area. And so, I mean, I wouldn't, I don't know. I think that that's a good example of something that started out temporary that isn't temporary any longer. And I don't think anyone, there was no, I don't know.
But that is protected, whereas the street art, was that originally supposed to be temporary as well? I mean, it's still, the
Yes, I
shark still looks
Yes, I
beautiful.
think it was. And I think that's
Yes.
that's the removal need,
Yeah.
because things start to deteriorate.
Mhm.
But it seems to me what you just said can be allotted for, but I like your 1 year. We could say something like it's typically 1 year or less, designed to be up for 1 year or less, or something like that.
Yeah.
unless you think 1 year is too short a time.
It might depend on the reason that the art is being created. Like say if it's pro Portsmouth or Winter Festival and they're doing ice sculptures, obviously they're going to be gone the next day. Sure. But so it could depend on, seasonally or the purpose of the art might affect,
Yeah.
when it was produced, why it was produced, might affect the length of
So
it.
maybe we should talk about why, and you've obviously thought about this, why we want separate criteria for temporary art. And I would say it's probably because we wouldn't be as strict about maintenance and materials and whatever. If we knew it was coming down in 6 months, we wouldn't worry as much about things like that, right?
Well, I think, and my biggest concern was actually twofold. One is that there is a timeline for that we kind of say, here's the timeline. And two, that make sure that there's budget for taking down if
Yeah.
it had to be taken down. So I think those were my two biggest ones. Is like, okay, to your point, the criteria, we might be a little looser, on that because we know it's just very temporary.
Right.
And you go, wow, that's not really, some of the things about that we have for the maintenance that we have criteria wouldn't
apply.
they wouldn't apply here. So I think the biggest question for me was just making sure that that it wasn't going to turn into something that we'd have to be ashamed of later or regret. And then that again, just the budget part of it, because you have to have somebody to do that. One other thing that comes up with that is then who's the gatekeeper for the timeline?
And that we have to have I think we could be the gatekeeper for the
Okay.
timeline if we had it specified. Okay.
I think there's also a question of when does this committee want to review temporary art? Because this committee probably doesn't want to review an ice sculpture.
No, we
And
don't
doesn't want to review a sand
Right.
mandala or chalk art on the street
Right.
so even though chalk art might last a week. So what is the criteria that triggers review?
Yeah.
Then that begs the question that and certainly I agree with you, we don't, if it's, especially if it's a festival that someone else is in charge of, like Pro Portsmouth or something. But we don't need to review everything they're doing because, Barbara Massar and her crew or whoever's running it has their criteria. But if it's somebody that just decides, well, gee, I think it'd be really cool to have a rainbow on this wall, or like,
What if
It's
we said it's
temporary.
designed to stay beyond an event? Your examples make me think that, these things for events, we don't need to deal with. But something that is designed to be in place beyond an event for a period of up to. Alyssa, wait.
I guess I just have a clarifying question about whether we're talking about only things that are on city property, or is this also a standard if you just wanted to paint, I don't know, some public
Well-
art that is on private property would be very hard to impose a time limit.
But what we could
on-
say though is, if it's subject to land use review, just like we do with our other things, because I believe if you were going to paint the side, well, we know that the murals in the HDC area have to go to HDC. So if it's subject to land,
If it's
that
subject
would
to land
bound it
use.
somewhat.
Okay,
you
that
know?
makes sense.
That's kind of how we've bounded our other work.
It would still might be hard to enforce on on a private property with the temporary.
can't
use.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
if it's private property and there's no
Well,
public
If
money
the
involved.
if the Wyland mural had happened today, that would have to come to park.
Mhm.
Because that's an HDC, in the HDC. It didn't at the time, I don't think anybody caught it at the time. But, I think now that we're in place, like, the sailboat that was put up went to HDC again, that was before we were part of the process. I don't know about the mural on Mr. Kim's, but it must have.
It was HDC, right?
Must have.
From like the homeowner's perspective, from somebody who lives in the HDC, one of the things that I was always concerned about, because I have a lot of yard art, was, is my yard art allowed without going to review? And it is, as long as it's removable. If it's permanently installed, though, I would have to go to the HDC
Interesting.
for a review.
That's interesting.
So, I have a little windmill kind of next to my shed. And it's not a problem because I can go outside and literally pull it out of the ground. But if I install it, so it's a permanent fixture on the site,
Mm,
so I need to get review.
That's a good
But it's,
question.
Yeah.
but it's really interesting. I can
Yeah.
paint my house though any way I want.
Yeah.
So there's a different standard almost for homes than there are for if you're in downtown historic district for paint, which is fascinating.
Not if you wanted to do a mural, though.
I know, it's very interesting,
Different.
but I'm
Mhm.
allowed to paint any
Yeah.
color without any permission. Yeah.
Theoretically, so are commercial properties. The color of the paint is not.
It just
Right.
can't be
Yeah.
pictorial.
So it's a very interesting HDC, that's really a fuzzy area for
Very
HDC, because you can paint brick. But as soon as you're painting a mural, they want to review it, so it's a little fuzzy.
Yeah.
And
that-
things
those
like
rules.
painted brick, would that fall in, knowing that it has long-term maintenance issues, does that then fall in temporary? And we say, if you paint this, you need to. I
But
don't
if
know.
it was someone's private home, we would have no right to say anything, right?
Yes, if they wanted to paint up. mural, that's what I'm saying, it's in the
I think
HDC.
that's right.
Yeah, if they're in the historic district.
Only if they're in the historic
Yes.
district?
Yes.
So if
Not-
they're not in the historic district, then we would have
Then
no
you
right
can
to say
do what-
anything.
do whatever. So it's.
But that's
it's-
the land use board bounding.
It's the land use board boundary, yeah. But we still have this, so we don't want to review everything. We don't want to review really short-term things.
I don't know that that's true because the signage ordinance is the signage ordinance all over the city, and that's, the mural is what falls under the
No, you're tr-
signage
you're right.
ordinance. So
Mural
that's
is a sign.
anywhere.
But again,
Yeah.
that, anything
Is
that the
another
HDC would
Yes, it is.
review,
Right.
like well, I guess the HDC did review the one on Liar's Bench. They did,
That's a whole other fuzzy area, the signage ordinance.
yeah.
Yeah, so,
So what you're trying to do though is to identify what things should come to us. How long does it have to be in place before it should come to us and we make a recommendation to HDC? Let's think of it that way. And it feels like it's not worth their time to do the 3-month kind of thing. I wonder if we need on timing to ask Peter Britz this question and just get a sense of when would they review, and ours should be aligned with theirs. So if they weren't going to review something that was up for 4 months, we don't need to.
I'm looking at some articles here, and it seems that larger cities, New York, Boston, Chicago, it's a really short time frame, and they cycle through a lot of art, 3 to 6 months. But smaller cities, Raleigh, Austin, their public art seems to be temporary, 5 years or less. So it
Mhm.
seems that that's what I'm seeing when I'm just doing a cursory.
I thought 1 year might be too short because, like, as we've seen, some have lasted.
They have.
But would it
lasted.
be onerous for us to be like, okay, we need to check on it every
Yeah.
year? To see if it's still okay?
I mean, we could also put that in. There is a bullet point there. If the temporary art becomes a permanent work, then it has to
Yeah.
go through the review
That's
process.
Mara's example, and that makes sense. That seems real clear.
can I add, there are some places in the city where it'd be nice to have temporary art that are only like a month long, like right now in downtown, the tree is down and there's nothing there and there's nothing growing there, and there won't be for a month and a half, 2 months.
Sure.
So thinking about kind of public spaces where this committee could suggest public
But
art.
you know, there's an example. You wouldn't want just anything to go there. You would want that to be reviewed.
Mhm.
Right.
So
Remember that cool
also-
ant that was there?
Mhm.
Yeah,
I
that
love that
also
ant.
adds to the complexity.
Mhm.
And Alyssa was just explaining to me, because I was on the side saying, why is a mural like, how is that a sign? And
Oh.
so what
Oh.
happened to the sculpture? And then, but then back to you, you said you have sculptures in your yard art, but it's the difference between, can you pick it up or is it an installed?
Yeah.
Boy.
Yeah.
A lot of,
And murals do have a I mean, they're more concerned about commercial because they inadvertently or subtly might be a sign. Do you know what I mean? They might try to get away with a mural that actually is a sign advertising your business, and that's what's regulated. So I don't know, Jen. What are you gonna take from this conversation?
Lots of good, I'm not quite sure. Again, my was the timeline and with the research I looked at, and again, I didn't look at big cities, but I was looking at some cities and they were mostly up to a year. So that's where mine came from, because that seems to be temporary. The 5 years that's not temporary in my mind. Again, I could be wrong on that one.
It said 5 years or less.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it seems like that's, like mine was like really, I kept thinking temporary, and only for the fact that it was results. What we were talking about was the artwork that was going to be on panels.
Yeah.
That was going to be there. And that's kind of what's triggered our discussion on a year.
And I think Beth is right that so often a year goes by pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And like the reflections photos, those were up for probably 5 or 6 years before people really thought about them. And so a year maybe is short,
You could say up to a year renewable.
Renewable, yeah.
renewable.
Yeah.
Yeah,
if it's
That's
still
a
in
good
good
idea.
condition.
if in good condition.
Yeah. Renewable.
One other criteria that I think kind of goes without saying, but all the applicable permits for installation. Because you can't just plunk, like you wouldn't
Right.
want somebody to just plunk something down in Market Square.
Nope, valid point. Missed that one.
So if someone were to want to do a temporary mural, I mean, what if it was making a political statement or, it might be Black Lives Matter, it might be LGBTQ, but it might be something more. I'm thinking of someone where I walk my dog has giant signs in their yard that are extremely political and also somewhat vulgar. Maybe because I disagree with them, but like, how do you take those kind of things into account? Like what
It's very challenging because those are First Amendment
Right.
issues.
This is the problem with the
But
sign.
again,
But yeah,
I
it
mean,
is
one of the-
addressed in the sign ordinance to some degree,
It is, but
not
yeah.
very well perhaps, but.
that's that was one of the discussion points that we thought we needed to have, what about things that are overtly political? And I mean, I think when you say that it's a land use issue in public space, that I think, I don't know, maybe it's worse, huh? Or it's more protected.
It's more protected.
I mean, or is this something that we just hit as a case by case basis and not tie ourselves up in knots for the political aspect of it, but just make sure that we address that on a case by case?
Right, and in our case, in the case of Park, we're a recommending body, so
Right.
we can recommend that we have concerns about the content, recognizing that there are First Amendment issues. We don't say a yes or no on the content.
Right.
We could say something about the aesthetics.
Are there any town ordinances about using vulgarities or signs or is that First Amendment thing
I
okay?
think those have been typically held up. There was a case in Hampton not that long ago.
You have a very large legal department.
Yeah, so we don't have to make that.
We haven't
decision.
had to deal with.
What we would do would be to flag it, but we wouldn't decide it.
But I just want to say that it would be unfortunate if somehow or other temporary art evolved into a platform for political statements, because I think that isn't really the spirit of what we're doing here.
But, I mean, historically.
All art is, I mean,
I was
political-
gonna say, all art
all
is,
art is making a
Statement,
statement,
right.
Yeah.
yeah.
so I
well-
wouldn't want to limit that because I think we would find that folks would, yeah, by saying nothing can be political, we might eliminate
well,
all
and for example,
possibilities.
I'm a member of the New Hampshire Art Association, and a number of their shows for the past several years have had months where you had to be juried in, and there was a specificity that it promote a certain, or make a statement about a certain
Right,
cause.
right.
You know, they had an LGBTQ month, they had a whole summer of learning about Black history that culminated in a show about the experience of diversity, equity and inclusion. Yeah, art can be construed as
mean,
political.
I would, no, well, we all accept it. I mean, the African Burying Ground was not without people objecting to what we were doing as it was political. And this came not from only people who you might think of extreme. It came from other people as well. So, you know, we're not going to be able to sort through that.
Can't fix everybody.
I guess the question is, Jen, do you think this discussion helps to maybe
Yes,
reframe
actually,
this a
it
little bit?
does. I'm going to try to add those bullet points, clarify a lot of things, and then I will have it sent out, and then we can just
can
really
look
look
at
at
it,
it next
yeah.
time, which is really all I think Mara and I were looking for this time anyway.
It's really important for us to warm up to this because if
Oh,
something
yeah.
comes to us,
Hmm.
we don't want to be kind of caught flat-footed not having had this discussion.
Well, that's what I was worried about with the last time, because
Yeah.
we don't have the
Right.
criteria for that.
Yes.
This seems like
Anything else before we,
This was political.
we
too,
kind of
an answer to that, the
say
environment.
do you need anything else or do you think have we,
I think we've addressed it, as long as by the removal date, if that becomes part of our parks, we just have to make notations of that to make sure that we are the guardians of that. Because really, there's probably nobody else to do that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Just a final thing, slightly different, but when we had artists present their art, I was concerned about like the elements and principles of design, and that it be, even if it's temporary, it should be good quality art. Like who's the decider of that? Collectively we are, or even if it's temporary, it should still be of good quality.
I think if
I
we
think-
decide it's something that's, it's not the event type, but it's
Right.
something that's going to be there for a while.
And I think that second bullet point that it must follow the applicable
Right, yeah.
criteria of permanent art. It's kind of, and I mean, I guess I just think when being worried about the political, of course, all art makes a statement, but there's a real difference between propaganda and art that is somehow using that aesthetic language in a way that is art. I mean, it's, all of the,
Well, I think your use of the word propaganda is interesting. Perhaps we could identify a criteria that, even respecting First Amendment, we don't believe that public art, has a propagandistic.
No, but art can be provoking, and that can
Well,
be a
sure,
good
yeah,
thing.
that's
like,
different.
That's
can
different.
provoke you
That's-
to think and question.
Yeah.
I think
Issues.
before making a decision about whether to make a statement here, looking at our criteria and thinking about if something overtly political came through and we ran it through our actual criteria.
What
It
would we
wouldn't
do?
make,
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
think it's a concern, but not one that we don't already have
Yeah.
the criteria to address.
And I think you could say maybe that was some of the controversy over the public art project that the art museum did, that they felt people might have felt some of those were sort of in your face in that way. I don't think they were partisan political, but a different kind of political. And then this is something that legal department can help us
Yeah.
with, and we could even invite someone from legal for a discussion to one of our meetings, maybe after we've polished this
Hmm.
Sure.
and
Right.
let them help us find the lines here.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
It's been helpful.
It's always a good
That's a good
discussion.
one.
Now for the next guidelines. Ernie, I have copies of what you and Nancy worked up.
Okay, great. So thanks. We got some great input at the last meeting, and that's what we use to draft these guidelines. And I think what was decided is the focus on K-12 students living or attending school in Portsmouth. We decided that we wanted to focus on public art projects, and it doesn't mean it has to fund public art, but it could be something to help interpret public art. Big focus on the learning experience. So, just put that all together, and I don't know how people feel about the guidelines. We couldn't really be too specific because it wasn't like, if you have public art, if it was going to be a piece of public art, there would be certain guidelines that we would have included, but since it could be something else, it was we wanted to keep it simple. So I don't know if anybody has any feedback on that.
I have a question when you say any art form. So you mean music and theater as well as visual art?
If it's, helping to interpret public art.
That language is in the trust. So we
Yeah.
have to decide what we were given.
Right.
And that language was in the trust. We brought that up last time because that is not our definition of public art. But it's in the trust. So we can't change that wording.
Right. So actually that brings up, some of these are criteria that you must meet, like number 1. Some are option. You don't have to, not every project has to meet number 4. Is that correct? Is that the intention? I mean, if I had a grant where I was, let's say, meeting number 2 and number 3, but I wasn't doing number 4, I could still, I don't have to do creative activities associated with a project.
No, that's a really good point. And do you think that's confusing?
Well, what we might lump together when we do this, the ones that are must-dos, and then,
Okay.
Right, I think that's
other options.
a good idea to have them specified.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think the important one is support the creation and installation of new public art or short-term or long-term programs that help interpret public art, creating a learning experience for students.
Yeah, that's really clear.
So maybe that other one is confuses the situation.
Or maybe it's a subset of number 5.
Yeah.
Because my read of this, and tell me if this is what you intended. Let's say I wanted to put in $2,000 because I wanted to bring musicians to the Endeavor site and work with students on maritime music. I'm not doing anything, I'm not making anything, but I'm engaging kids in understanding more the Endeavor sculpture. And that's intended, yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question about number 6. I think maybe it's just a
It's
wording
wording, it should
clarity.
get rid of that have, I think.
But request funding.
Oh, I see. I know. I'd made the request funding of 10,000 or less. Meaning the budget might be higher because you might have another
Right.
source of
Okay.
funds.
Okay, so
That's
the request is limited to $10,000 regardless of the project
of
budget.
how big the budget is.
Ah. Great. Makes much more sense. Thank you.
So you think we need to tweak that a little bit?
think it's a typo.
It's just a typo, yeah.
Well,
Well,
I'm not sure if it's just a typo or
or
if,
it's get rid of the couple words there. Request funding of $10,000 or less.
yes.
Simplify.
So get rid of the project could have, or wait, maybe I have,
Half a budget.
what is the one you have say? I think I have a different one.
It just, make it just say request funding of 10,000 or less.
Yeah, okay, that's what I have, but then there's a parentheses, the project could have other sources of funding in addition. Okay,
No, you
Yeah.
can keep that in parentheses. It just,
So ours says request funding, have a budget of 10,000 or less, and they're asking to delete have a budget,
Just say
which is
request
already
funding.
deleted in your copy. We must have an old version.
okay.
Mystery solved.
Question, under this criteria, would this be something that, say, the school district could ask for $500 to cover busing to the Historical Society to see the Cabot Lyford exhibit in the spring with a group of students?
I would think so.
I think that would go under number 3.
yeah.
So it's almost like it's 3 or 4 or 5. You could do any of those. Those are like, I don't have to do all 3 of those. I just have to do one of those.
Yeah.
So number 3, 4, and 5, they must do one of them.
One of them.
One, but not more.
But not more.
Okay.
Is number 1 really the goal of this?
Well, it has some limit. It does say K-12 living or attending school in Portsmouth, and that's not clear in the trust.
Okay.
So it does define it a little more.
And there-
What about number 7, preferred but not required? What was the thinking there?
Well, I think, if you're going to do, I think the consensus of Park was, when we discussed it, that it would be good to have a lasting impact. But for example, funding $500 for a bus to go see the Cabot Lyford, that wouldn't have it. Well, I mean, I guess it would have a lasting educational impact.
But not to, yeah, it's hard to know. So I see what you mean. So maybe
It
if-
doesn't have to be something that's permanent, I guess, is what that was intended to communicate.
But if you were choosing between 2 projects, if one did have something that could be more permanent, you'd prefer that one.
How would you measure that? I mean, I think you could leave out preferred, not required, because you can't really measure it. Like, if it's a young student and they're going to see the exhibit, how do you measure?
Well, it's more like, it's not necessarily on the student, but maybe something documented. Maybe you have something in the school library, maybe you have, so something that isn't just an event.
And I guess my thought was, you don't want to prevent people from, applying for something like the bus. Because they think, you kind of wanted to make it clear that that will be considered, but it's not, you don't have to have that. I mean, we don't need that, I guess, but I guess it's how strongly people feel about the lasting impact.
What if the word wasn't lasting?
Mhm.
What if it just said had a educational impact, or you could even say significant, but I mean, lasting is, like lifetime. Just
Yeah. some
have an
other word.
educational impact and contribute to the ongoing discussion, blah, 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 about the city's history and culture.
And actually, the fact that ongoing dialogue kind of suggests that anyway.
Yeah.
That works for me.
I admit being a little out of the loop on this, but are all of these, like the bus costs, coming to us for approvals? Or we're just building out the criteria?
We're building out the criteria.
Yes, so then, did you, I had also done an overview document, and, I don't know, did you hand that out, or?
I don't know if we have that or not.
Okay, that was in the email I sent, because that addresses, Beth's question about the program committee. The city's Public Art Review Committee and the Portsmouth Public Library Director will determine the terms, conditions, and methodology of each proposed project.
So the idea is that with the library and with Park, and I think Ernie was thinking, which makes sense to me, that we would set a once or twice a year deadline. And we would get an applicant, couple applicants, and we would decide among together those applicants.
That makes sense. Have a cadence.
And the applicants you're talking about all coming from the education.
Well, not, I mean, they could come from
Institutions.
anybody, but it would
Oh.
be for students. So, you know, I don't think the trust limits it to, could, for example, I believe an artist
Yeah.
propose? Yeah,
That's in the language.
Yeah.
An artist or an educator or an organization.
Like I think it says nonprofit.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is maybe a picayune, silly question, but when we're talking about education, is it just Portsmouth public education, or could it be homeschooled or?
oh, it says
Focus
living.
on
Living in or
Yeah.
attending school, right?
Or attending school.
What if they're not living in Portsmouth, but they're attending, say, a parochial school or? so
Yeah.
I just want to know if it was only public schools.
No, I don't think it says that.
Mm-mm.
So I just have a question about how this dovetails with the trust documents. Do we need to run this by legal once we've decided?
Will eventually, I think,
Okay.
because we'll have, but I think if you've ever watched the trustees of trust funds
Mhm.
struggle to try to spend $500 because you can't interpret what the trust was. I mean, that's what this is gonna do. This is gonna help, I think. It's like an intermediate document to say, all right, this trust had lots of great ideas on it, but if we're gonna spend money, it's gonna. But yeah, it's gonna have to go through
Okay.
And yes,
legal,
we lined all of these with language right from the trust.
yeah,
Okay. Okay.
and it's gotta go to the trustees as well. So it's gotta go through a couple.
So Nancy and I tweaked this a little bit with the comments that came in tonight. And then, I mean, we have to run it by, should we run it by Park again? Or should we go to Christine at the library? And,
You can send your draft to Sean, he can share it with all of us, just so we
okay,
have a copy of that. And then I think with Christine to see if that meets with, I don't even know if she knows she's named in the trust.
okay.
I haven't told her.
So yeah, Nancy and I will work on that, and then I'll send it to Sean. And then we'll send it to Christine. Because we have to come up with a timeline too, when and how we want to announce this. So
We've got a lot of approvals ahead of us even.
I know that's why I didn't even put a timeline in there. I thought about it, but
So, Kate, maybe, do you believe, I guess it's legal and then trustees and then council? Or the council doesn't need to deal with this, it's just the legal and the trustees, is that right?
Yes, and legal can work it with the trustees. I
Right.
think. They can do that
Okay.
for you. I've had to deal with that before, and making sure that the trustees were happy with the language.
Right.
There's usually always a word they're not happy with. that they need to
Exactly.
change. So,
That's good. And so, realistically, we'd probably be aiming for maybe in the fall to do our first call, because especially if it's largely going to be educational nonprofit institutions, the summer wouldn't be a great time, and it's going to take a couple months to get through this.
Great. Sounds like a plan.
Yeah, I like the fact that it's a few basic criteria, because I think that the trust document is confused. You have to really pick your way through it. And I think this will really help a lot.
Well, that's why I did the overview and just kind of pulled like some of the key, the key information. And I'll send that to Sean when I send everything out, when I send the revised guideline.
Thank you.
So Ernie, would you like to handle the next couple?
Sure. So the next item on the agenda is the button project. And I think we hadn't really talked about that much. I think Chris had mentioned a few possible places where that could go. The library, the middle school, community campus, senior center. But am I remembering correctly? Were there other ideas, or?
I think we talked about, potentially the new police station if we.
Oh, the police station. Yeah. And I think it's interesting. I guess it's 10 feet tall, right?
It's
Yeah.
very tall.
It's
Yeah.
at least 10.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if anybody had any other ideas, or do any of those options kind of jump out at them as a really good suggestion?
Just because we were just looking at K-12 students and thinking about the, having K-12 students understand some of our history. And even though that isn't only Portsmouth history, obviously, I wonder about the middle school, whether the middle school would be interested. I mean, it sort of is, when I think of this, Education and Public Art Trust was conceived to really try to engage the next generation. I know how important that was to the Portsmouth 400 folks, of trying to find ways to engage the next generation in public art, in history. I wonder offering it to the middle school. Melissa,
Yeah, my first reaction is just, it's a very tactile piece, and that might not do well in a middle school environment.
Right, I had that very same first
Put it in
reaction.
plexiglass.
Yes.
That was
Yeah.
exactly mine. I thought, "Ooh, pick a
unless it was
button."
high. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Unless it was protected, but
In a glass showcase.
Right,
And it's
but it,
remote.
Really
yeah,
It's
it's
big
less
thing to
immediate,
put.
yeah.
I mean, it's really hidden where it is now.
Would you have the same concerns at the library, though?
No, nor the, the senior center and community campus, both under the rec department, and it might be that we engage, talk to the library already has a lot of art that they are juggling
does.
around, and it's
It
pretty,
does.
but the rec department might welcome that because they don't have this much, and they have a lot of space.
And they've just had some renovations over at community campus.
Right.
Community campus sounds like that. The senior center, you're talking to people who already know the whole story.
That's true.
So if we're talking about the K through 12, the senior center, as one of a senior, we know that story,
Yep.
and I don't, not.
Change
sure-
Maybe rec center and then the police station when it's there.
well, we could start with the community campus, right?
Which is it?
The rec department.
They-
Todd Henley is
they
the
manage-
Director of Recreation.
But they manage the school part as well?
You say manage this,
No.
no,
So-
you mean,
I mean,
Lister
city
Academy,
manager.
Lister Hampton,
Yeah,
but it's.
No, they have tenants, right? Then
I
there's
see,
Academy
I
as a
see.
tenant,
okay.
but the community campus is managed by the rec department, Todd
Okay.
Henley.
So our recommendation would go to the city manager, right? That was the-
Yes, because that's where it came from. Yep.
Okay. Does that feel right to people?
I also think, another, if community campus doesn't want it, a second thought could be, maybe Fire Station 2, one of the newer buildings. I mean, firefighters were
Yeah.
Another
the
point.
number one,
And
Yeah.
casualties on 9/11.
And they do have the community room. I don't know how often that's really used for the public.
And I don't know if the ceiling is tall enough.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
question I was asking. How
Yes.
tall? I don't know how tall the ceiling is at Fire Station 2. I was trying to think of spaces.
Yeah.
And community campus definitely has a height. The entry to the senior center, I think, has some height. Is it the entry or is it the back? It would have to go in the
big
cafeteria
room in the back,
area in the
yeah.
back.
Yeah.
But that gets a lot of use and a lot of people are in and out of there. So, I mean, but we just don't have a lot of. height.
And so I feel like it's important to say, it's not so much about 9/11, but about an artistic response to an event that is what we're talking about. Like, this isn't a reminder about 9/11. It's like, look at how you can think about a tragedy. You can pull in people, you can write letters and have strangers send you something, and
Mhm.
together you've created this thing. I mean, that's the message. It's
Right.
not remember 9/11.
Right.
It's how a creative response can bring people together in a time when people feel powerless.
Which of course makes a great argument for putting it in the middle school or in some public education kind of space, because that is really
Yeah.
a terrific
It
lesson.
does have that.
Community campus certainly is an educational space. I mean, it's focused on recreation, but it's educational and it is K through 12 and heavily used. It has the Robert Lister Academy.
Wouldn't people touch it
Has-
there too?
yeah.
The kids
Yeah.
touch it there?
Public
right?
meetings.
Adult
Just saying.
education, are there
The middle
any,
school, right?
continuing ed?
Potentially.
I don't,
It's a good point.
They have
could
senior
be through the
center.
rec center, through the rec. Yeah, yes. I was thinking about a separate.
We do
So-
have senior activities there. There's the Crimple Center that's there.
Right.
That
Yeah.
services mostly adults
Yeah.
and Seacoast Outright and
Good stuff.
the,
Yeah,
yeah,
so-
there's several adult service organizations.
So if Park would make the recommendation, I'm happy to shepherd the conversation.
Stalled here for a long time and it hasn't been like pulled apart.
No.
But I guess I think, I don't know.
It's in an area where people don't even engage. with
Right,
it.
so that
Yeah.
might be a reason why people
Yeah.
haven't
And
pulled
I,
at the
and I'd be
buttons.
willing to bet that if we asked the artist, Sarah Haskell would come to a relocation.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, re-energize it.
You know,
Yeah. I
and
think that would be
a
interesting. too.
re-unveiling or whatever, and explain to people
Yeah.
about what I just talked about.
The nice thing about community campus is these dramatic spaces that
Yeah.
exist in like the entryway.
And those
But-
people are probably not coming to city council very often.
Yeah.
the
No.
People that are at.
And maybe they could even rotate it throughout
Right.
city, community campus.
So,
And I think the signage will be really important.
Yes.
That, describes, what it's about, and what it honors. So it sounds like there's a consensus on the community campus to start with that.
yeah,
Yes.
yes.
Okay.
So Sean would carry forth that recommendation, basically.
Well, if you'll make it, I'll carry it forward.
Yeah.
I'm not.
As I said, I think we have a consensus.
We don't need to take a vote or anything, do we?
Do you need a memo from us or write up? What would help?
Yeah, I think just an email that says
An email,
Mark discussed it and here's a recommendation.
Okay.
As
Is there a sign with it now that explains or?
Not really.
No, I have that book that I had brought, and so it would be easy to just take stuff from that to make such a sign. It's all it's well documented.
So can we make the recommendation that it goes in the community campus with signage, with,
Yes.
And then Park could support that effort to create the signage.
Yeah. What it should be. Good.
Interpretation.
Yay. Okay.
sounds good. All right, then the last is the planning for present for art for Hanover Garage. And Chris, I think you probably know more about this than I do, but I think you said that 68,000 had been deposited in the park account.
Yeah, 68. So, to me, it's like, that's our next project. I know we've had a lot on our plates, but we should start. I'd like that we've been able to space things out too, though, that we did the codfish, we'll have Pierce Island, we'll have the school project, so it's not like we have to do it right away, but I also don't want the money to disappear somehow.
I mean, is there a deadline for that?
No.
No?
So, I think we should talk about when we think we should. And if we have it well in advance, we can give artists long notice and.
So the project is scheduled to be completed in the fall and
This fall.
just, yeah,
Seems a little
as you, well, and then there's other things that are happening behind the garage, but that's private, but just to say,
Oh,
just to say, as you think about how to spend
you're right.
the 68,000,
We have to think about us.
so that's the,
That might direct us to
Uh,
where we want to place it
yeah.
on the other
Yeah.
side.
So, yeah, if the construction is completed, the city's construction is completed by the fall, then at least you've got a complete canvas, as it
So-
were.
Percentage for art for the Hanover Garage, okay, of 68,000. Does that mean that the public art has to be at the Hanover Garage, or can it be in the money used in another town-owned
Thank
space?
If we were to do that, we would need council authority to do that.
Yeah, I just didn't know the guidelines.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
I probably read it. and
Just
forgot
like
it.
we had with Pierce Island, there was the authority, it didn't have to be at the wastewater treatment plant. It'd be at Pierce Island.
Okay, thank you.
So it could be on the outside, it could be on the inside. I think we just need to start thinking about it and maybe tune into different public art in different garages that we've seen and different examples. I thought one of our best decisions about Pierce Island was when we were able to say, here's where it should be. And that we bounded this in some ways with some consideration. And we don't have to be quite as bounding, but I still think it's helpful if we can come to some consensus about it should either be here or here or here, and we want proposals that do this for us. So that's what I think we have to come to first.
That brings up the question. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Sean.
That's okay.
Do we, is the final layout of just say the Hanover side of it, is that it? Is there any changes to the facade there?
I don't believe so. It's all internal
So
right
it's
now.
it's internal, right?
But
Okay.
yeah, and I guess what popped into my mind as you were speaking was that you've got the other side of the garage where you all have looked at art that is proposed
Right.
for the other side. So whether that's a consideration or a thought,
Total.
So maybe our homework is we should all spend a little time at the garage. and think about this as well as looking at, garages around the world there's some amazing things that have been. So, to take a look at and do a little individual work and be prepared for it.
and while I'm on a roll, then eventually there will be Fleet Street work, right, Counselor?
I think so.
There'll be Fleet Street, that new Fleet Street look that has been out there and is waiting for other underground things to happen. Just, again, something to
Yes.
think about since you have got an exit and a wall on Fleet Street.
Street. So that's coming after Von Mall. So Von Mall has to be done first
Right.
Yeah.
and the end of Congress, because that's where all the sewer line separation has to be tied in, and then Fleet.
Yeah.
All right,
So
so we got
there's-
that side of it as well. So it's really three sides that we could work from, or the inside. if you decide.
And I do believe there's going to be an upgrade to the restrooms in there. I do believe. And I have one other topic when we're done getting
Yeah,
excited about.
Is anything else about the garage? Because I think we just want to start warming ourselves up to it.
There's also on the site, I think they're big electrical boxes that sit just off to the side. That's
That's
something
right.
else to think about.
Mm,
When I was in Toronto and I saw every single little electrical box that was
something
painted in beautiful murals, I just kept thinking, we've got these electrical boxes right in the middle of town.
Right.
Yeah.
That's also on the side of the garage.
So Kate, Terrence Parker has been wanting to do those electric boxes for years, and I guess they're partly owned by Eversource or something.
Yeah, we tried that
Probably
before.
totally.
Yeah,
Some of them are, and some of them are just city mechanicals, so.
Right.
Yeah, the Eversource has turned us down before,
Hmm.
but you know, times change.
Have they met Park?
Sean, why don't
Yes,
you-
an issue came up recently that you all will, well, somebody's going to hear about, but that's not a threat. No, it just recently came up. So the city is working through our insurance with Primex. And when it comes to public art, they were asking about appraisals. As an example, the COD, we don't have an appraisal. I tried to submit the cost
Yeah.
and they're like, no, we need an appraisal. So there's a few of us at City Hall who are going to be talking about how to address the Primex need for
They need an
appraisal.
Appraisal, is that the idea?
They need an appraisal. We do not have an appraisal. And I would ask the question, I don't think we have an appraisal yet of Endeavor.
I don't,
Do we?
Well, would appraisal be like the cost to replace it? So you wouldn't be including the artist fee, I guess.
Right. It's what we would insure it for, and there's all kinds of rules around what we can insure, how much we can insure per installation. So more to come on that, but I just wanted to let this group know that.
Is there a appraiser who works specifically with public art and municipal art that we could?
I have a request over to the library, but the other comment that caught my ear was, is this something that I'll say Park needs to think about going forward? If
I
piece,
think it's interesting, especially if the budget isn't there.
right,
Yeah.
right, because there's no separate line item for appraisals of public art that I'm aware of.
Dealt with in the past.
Well, I can tell you,
I guess.
I'm a museum person, that at the museum, our insurance values are based on typically the quote value of the art, which for contemporary work is easy because it's what you just bought it for.
Mhm.
But I'm not sure how often we appraise the Picassos, for example, but I can find that out because obviously they were bought for much less than they're now worth. Let me
So
find that out.
more to come on that.
Does the library use for our art collection?
I'm not sure, but
Just kind of wonder, or
But-
do they?
I
Sure we have
I
some.
don't think they
Is-
have.
What about past art that already exists? Do these appraisals exist for, the other parking garage
I-
and?
I-
So
I-
I would ask why,
This is-
why now? What's different about
Well,
other old?
Why
pieces
now?
of art?
I assume because we're actually they actually know that we're doing public art.
yeah, it just came up and there's a group of us that are going to get together, HR who deals with our insurance and Suzanne Woodland, and myself and
But
and
it sounds like
Christine,
it might be
please.
a bigger issue for all public art that already exists.
Yeah.
It would be.
yeah,
Well, city owned.
City owned.
city owned,
exactly, But that's
city owned.
a lot,
yeah.
as we've established.
Yeah, the Cabot Lyford sculptures would be
Uh-huh.
bigger concern.
Yeah.
And some things, if they're too big, are not like they only go up. this is all snippets from a conversation that was all new to me and so I'm sharing it as more to come.
What is
and-
that action item here?
But I guess my question was, is that something that we have to figure in budgets from now on?
Potentially,
That
yes.
becomes
That's why
part of
that's why I'm saying it.
budget as opposed to a city budget?
Right. Once we figure out what our responsibilities are, there may be a request back to Park to say for future or, right. So that's kind of the
Why wouldn't
trailer here.
The
city pay
Hanover
for it?
Garage.
I mean, they
We
pay
need
for
to-
their
we have a
attorney.
line
There's a
they pay
line
for
in there for
their
appraisal. Yeah.
Lawyers, I think, well, I guess that's the same as attorneys, but I mean, why wouldn't the city? pay
These
for
are
it?
questions I don't know the answers to, Lenny.
The
Sounds like
cost,
total.
somebody has to pay for it.
Yeah.
It's to come from somewhere. And if it's coming, if Percent for Art is paying for the sculpture, it's paying for the installation, it's probably paying for the appraisal. If an appraisal is a requirement, I think that we should just celebrate that maybe we're not paying for the insurance.
Sure.
I guess the other question about this is, this is something like in a museum, you do not, on your balance sheet, you don't show the value of the art. Partly because it's not replaceable. And, you're not gonna sell it. These pieces that we have are not replaceable, really. We're not gonna do another endeavor if it blew away tonight. And I don't think we wouldn't do the same exact thing. And we're not gonna sell it. So I mean, I think the same argument that museums use might be something, not that they
So
don't
might you be
insure
available
things.
for a
Yeah.
conversation, Chris? Like how you understand all this.
Talk about replacement value. That's why insurance wants it. And,
Yeah.
and
if you can't
just, we wouldn't replace them.
Yeah, I think there's an opportunity for us to engage, right, with the insurer or whatever, to make sure that the conversation is balanced and everyone's understanding the same request and
Yeah.
need.
Yeah.
So that'd be great.
And, yeah, interesting. But you know, I say that, but as I've watched some of our wind lately and watched some of those fish,
Mm,
we
Mm.
could replace a fish or two that, you know, that's a different kind of thing on it.
Right.
So does the appraisal, which is used to insure it, does the insurance also cover things like, you know, if somebody were to get injured?
City liability, yeah.
That's Primex's main concern.
Yeah,
That's
which is
that's the main. yeah.
as Kate said, I mean, that's great, and from our standpoint. All right, we covered a lot of territory. So homework is all about garages. Take a look if you're not familiar with
With
the
this, yeah.
Black Heritage Trail site.
Yeah, and I personally want to go look at the community campus and think about,
Yes, yes.
Do that too.
Actually, that's a good idea. And if anybody does that and has a more specific idea of where they think it would go, we can make our recommendation more specific. I like that.
okay.
I will, good. Okay, so a motion to adjourn, I guess.
So moved?
Second.
Good. And Nancy, you'll do the Google sheet, so.
Yeah, who, it was Mara and who?
Lenny.
Lenny and Melissa.
Oh, it was Lenny and,
Melissa.
We want to identify right now somebody who will do the minutes for the next one, just so we have that. in
I'll
mind.
happily do the minutes for
So
next
then
one.
we'll do that.
Happily.
Happily.
And then we can get the rest going after
Right.
that. And there was one meeting, remember, Sean, was the May meeting where we can't meet here? There was one, remember, we had to find an alternate
Yes.
date. Because this is being used. We can look that up and tell you, but we're good for March and April, but I think the May meeting,
Right.
we have to change somehow.
Right.
So we'll work on that.
Did we do it all the way out except for November, December, or not yet?
We did it all the way out, except we learned.
for
that
May?
We have to
May,
change.
Yeah.
that.
May's best.
Can you tell me what November, December? Because
Okay,
those are,
there we go.
it's the day before Thanksgiving.
We're
It's one of them.
Jewish.
I'm gonna